The train rattled through the endless prairie, carrying Eleanor Montgomery toward an uncertain future. At 26, she clutched a worn leather suitcase containing everything she owned: 3 dresses, her mother's silver locket, and a single photograph of the man she was traveling to marry. James Hartwell. A farmer from Nebraska. That's all the advertisement had said. Eleanor traced her finger over the faded photograph. His face was weathered, serious, with kind eyes that seemed to hold secrets. The letter he'd written was simple, almost apologetic. "I'm not a wealthy man, Miss Montgomery. But I can offer you a home, honest work, and respect. If you're willing to build a life on the frontier, I'd be honored to have you as my wife." She'd accepted within a week. New York had nothing left for her. After her father's factory closed and her mother's death from consumption, Eleanor found herself alone in a city that devoured the vulnerable. She'd worked as a seamstress, then a laundress, barely affording a cramped room she shared with 2 other women. When she saw the advertisement for mail-order brides in the newspaper, desperation made the decision easy. The other passengers gave her curious glances. She knew what they saw: a thin woman in a patched gray dress, her auburn hair pulled back severely, dark circles under her green eyes. She looked exactly like what she was, someone running from poverty toward the smallest hope of survival. First time out west. An elderly woman across the aisle smiled kindly. Eleanor nodded. "I'm getting married. In Riverside Creek." "Ah, a mail-order bride." The woman's expression remained warm, free of judgment. "I was one myself, 40 years ago. Married a miner in Colorado. Best decision I ever made." She leaned forward conspiratorially. "Don't believe everything they tell you about frontier life. Sometimes it's harder than they say. Sometimes it's better." As the train pulled into Riverside Creek Station, Eleanor's heart hammered against her ribs. The platform was nearly empty, just a few scattered people and dust swirling in the afternoon heat. She stepped down, her legs shaky from 2 days of travel, scanning the faces for the man from the photograph. "Miss Montgomery." She turned. James Hartwell stood before her, hat in hand. He was taller than she'd imagined, broader in the shoulders, with sun-bronzed skin and calloused hands. His clothes were clean but worn: patched trousers, a faded work shirt, boots that had seen better days. Everything about him screamed poverty, just as she'd expected. "Mr. Hartwell." Her voice came out steadier than she felt. "James, please." His smile was gentle, transforming his serious face. "Welcome to Riverside Creek. You must be exhausted. Let me take your bag." He reached for her suitcase, and she noticed the careful way he handled it, as if it contained treasures rather than her meager possessions. They walked to a wagon hitched to 2 horses, not the sway-backed, tired animals she'd expected, but healthy, well-groomed creatures that stood patiently. The town itself was small, just a main street with a general store, a church, a saloon, and scattered houses. Everything was dusty and sun-bleached. This would be her new home. "It's not much," James said, helping her into the wagon. "But the people are good. Honest. We look after each other out here." As they left town, Eleanor studied the landscape. Endless fields stretched in every direction, gold with late summer wheat. The sky was impossibly vast, bigger than any sky she'd seen in New York. Despite her anxiety, something in her chest loosened slightly. There was space here. Room to breathe. "How far is your farm?" she asked. "About 5 miles. We'll be there before sunset." He glanced at her sideways. "I want to be honest with you, Miss Montgomery. Life won't be easy. The work is hard. Winters are brutal. And I'm not a man of means. But what I have, I'll share with you. And I promise to treat you with respect and kindness." His words were so earnest, so different from the calculating men she'd known in the city. Eleanor felt an unexpected warmth toward this stranger who would become her husband. "I'm not afraid of hard work," she said quietly. "And I appreciate your honesty." They rode in comfortable silence as the sun began its descent. Eleanor's expectations of James's farm were modest. She'd imagined a small, run-down cabin, perhaps a few acres of struggling crops, the kind of desperate homestead that would explain why a man needed to advertise for a wife. She'd steeled herself for poverty worse than what she'd left behind. As they crested a hill, James pulled the horses to a stop. "There it is. Home." Eleanor's breath caught in her throat. Before them stretched not a struggling farm, but an impressive estate. A large, two-story white house with a wraparound porch dominated the view, its windows gleaming in the golden evening light. Behind it stood a massive red barn, several outbuildings, and corrals where dozens of horses grazed. Perfectly maintained fences stretched across what must have been hundreds of acres of fertile farmland. I don't understand," Eleanor whispered. James's expression became unreadable. "I wasn't entirely truthful in my advertisement." Fear spiked through her. Had she been deceived? Was this some cruel joke? He continued, "I am a farmer. That part was true. But I'm not poor. My father left me this land, and I've built it into one of the most successful operations in 3 counties. I own 1,200 acres, raise horses and cattle, grow wheat and corn. I employ 15 men year-round." Eleanor stared at him, her mind reeling. "Then why would you need to advertise for a wife? Why would you claim to be not a wealthy man?" James's jaw tightened. He flicked the reins, and the wagon began moving again. "5 years ago, I courted a woman from town. Sarah Henshaw. Beautiful, charming. We were engaged to be married." His voice went flat. "2 weeks before the wedding, I overheard her talking to her sister. She said she didn't love me, could barely tolerate me, but she'd be a fool to pass up the wealthiest farm in the county. She said once we were married, she'd spend her time in Denver and Chicago, leaving me to work my dirt farm alone." Eleanor's heart ached at the pain in his words. "I called off the wedding," he continued. "Since then, every woman who's shown interest in me, I can see it in their eyes. They see dollar signs. They see fine dresses and trips to the city. They don't see me." He pulled the wagon up in front of the house. "I wanted to find someone who would accept me as just a farmer. Someone willing to build a life from honest work and mutual respect. Someone who wouldn't be marrying me for what I own." He turned to face her directly. "I understand if you feel deceived. If you want to go back to New York, I'll pay for your ticket and give you money for a fresh start. I won't hold you to our agreement. But I hope." He paused, vulnerability crossing his features. "I hope you'll give me a chance to prove that the man in that letter is who I really am, regardless of the size of my bank account." Eleanor sat motionless, processing everything. She looked at the beautiful house, the prosperous farm, then back at James's weathered, honest face. In his eyes, she saw not arrogance or manipulation, but deep loneliness and a desperate hope for genuine connection. "You're right," she said finally. "You weren't truthful. But I understand why." She thought of her own journey, her own desperation. "We're both here because we were looking for something real. Something that can't be bought or sold. Then you'll stay." "I'll stay." She managed a small smile. "Though I should warn you, I was prepared to cook simple meals over a wood stove in a one-room cabin. That house looks like it might have an actual kitchen." James's relieved laugh was warm and genuine. "It does. With a cast-iron stove and running water. My mother insisted on it before she passed." He helped her down from the wagon. "Come. Let me show you around." The house was even more impressive inside. Polished wooden floors, comfortable furniture, a parlor with a piano, a dining room with a table that could seat 12. Eleanor ran her fingers along the smooth banister of the staircase, overwhelmed. There are 4 bedrooms upstairs, James said quietly. I've prepared the largest one for you. I'll stay in my room at the other end of the hall. I know we've agreed to marry, but I don't expect anything from you until you're ready. If you're ever ready. His consideration touched her deeply. In New York, she'd known men who would have demanded their rights immediately. Thank you, she whispered. An older woman with kind eyes and gray hair appeared from what must be the kitchen. You must be Miss Montgomery. I'm Martha, the housekeeper. I've prepared supper and drawn a bath for you. You must be exhausted from your journey. A housekeeper. Running water. Eleanor felt as if she'd stumbled into a dream. The contrast between what she'd expected and this reality was so extreme that she felt dizzy. I'll let you settle in, James said. We'll eat in an hour, if that suits you. Alone in the beautiful bedroom, Eleanor sat on the edge of a bed softer than any she'd slept in, and finally allowed herself to cry, not from sadness or fear, but from overwhelming relief and confusion. She'd been prepared to endure poverty, to work her fingers to the bone, to accept a hard life in exchange for security. Instead, she'd found wealth beyond imagination and a man who valued honesty above all else. The first week at the Hartwell farm passed in a strange dream. Eleanor woke each morning in the comfortable bedroom, still half expecting to find herself back in the cramped New York boarding house. Martha served elaborate breakfasts, eggs, bacon, fresh bread, preserves, luxuries Eleanor had forgotten existed. James treated her with careful courtesy, never pushing, always respectful of the space between them. But Eleanor found herself restless. She wasn't accustomed to idleness, and the weight of the deception, however well-intentioned, sat heavy on her conscience. On the 8th morning, she came downstairs before dawn, dressed in her oldest dress, and found James preparing to head to the barn. I want to work, she announced. He turned, surprised. You don't need to. I know I don't need to. I want to. She met his eyes steadily. You may not have been honest about your wealth, but you were honest about offering me a partnership. Partners share work. Something shifted in James's expression, respect, perhaps, or relief. Can you ride a horse? No. Then that's where we'll start. He introduced her to a gentle mare named Daisy and spent the morning teaching her the basics. Eleanor fell twice, earning bruises and James's concerned attention, but she climbed back on each time. By afternoon, she could walk Daisy around the corral without assistance. You're stubborn, James observed, a hint of admiration in his voice. I survived New York alone for 2 years, Eleanor replied, patting Daisy's neck. I don't give up easily. Over the following weeks, Eleanor insisted on learning every aspect of the farm. She helped Martha in the kitchen, learning to cook for the workers who came in for meals. She studied the account books, her years of education finally useful as she helped organize James's financial records. She learned to recognize different crops, understand animal husbandry, and appreciate the complex rhythms of farm management. The farm workers, initially suspicious of the city bride, gradually accepted her. She treated them with respect, learned their names and families, and when young Tommy broke his arm, she sat with him for hours, reading aloud to distract him from the pain. James watched all this with growing admiration. One evening, as they sat on the porch after supper, he said, "You're nothing like I expected." "Because I'm not crying over broken nails and demanding to go to the city?" He laughed. "I suppose I had some prejudices about city women. You've proven me wrong at every turn." Eleanor looked out over the darkening fields. "I won't lie and say I don't enjoy the comfort. After sleeping on a thin mattress and eating bread and cheese for most meals, this feels like heaven. But..." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "The wealth isn't what makes me want to stay. What does?" She turned to meet his eyes. "The respect. The partnership. The fact that you see me as a person, not a servant or an ornament. That's worth more than any amount of money." The space between them felt charged with possibility. As autumn arrived, painting the trees in brilliant colors, Eleanor and James settled into an easy companionship. They shared meals, discussed farm business, and slowly began sharing their histories. She told him about her father's factory, the desperation of poverty, the loneliness of losing her mother. He spoke of his parents, his struggles to build the farm, the betrayal that had left him wary of connection. "I'm sorry about Sarah," Eleanor said one evening as they walked through the orchards. "What she did was cruel." "I'm not," James replied, surprising her. "If she'd gone through with the wedding, I'd have been miserable. Her rejection gave me the chance to find." He stopped, suddenly awkward. "To find someone real." Eleanor's heart beat faster. "James, about our arrangement." "You don't have to. Let me finish." She took a breath. "When I came here, I was prepared to fulfill my duties as a wife. I expected a practical arrangement, nothing more. But these past weeks..." She searched for the right words. "I've come to care for you. Not for what you own, but for who you are. Your kindness, your integrity, your terrible jokes at breakfast." He smiled at that. "They're not that terrible. They're awful." She laughed, then turned serious. "I want this to be a real marriage, James. Not just a business arrangement. But only if you want that too." In answer, he took her hand, the first time he'd truly touched her since that day at the train station. His palm was rough with calluses, warm and strong. "I've wanted that since the first week. But I didn't want to pressure you. I wanted you to choose freely." "I'm choosing," Eleanor whispered. Under the autumn sky, surrounded by trees heavy with apples, James Hartwell kissed his wife for the first time. Winter arrived fierce and unforgiving. Snow piled high against the barn walls, and temperatures plummeted. Eleanor discovered that wealth couldn't eliminate all hardships, just change their nature. When 3 horses fell ill, she spent nights in the barn with James, helping administer medicine and keeping watch. When a worker's wife went into difficult labor, Eleanor rode through a snowstorm to fetch the doctor, arriving back frostbitten but successful. The town's opinion of her evolved from skepticism to respect. At the Christmas church service, Sarah Henshaw, James's former fiancée, approached with obvious curiosity. "Mrs. Hartwell," Sarah said, her eyes taking in Eleanor's simple but well-made dress. "I hear you've been quite the help on the farm." Eleanor recognized the calculation in Sarah's eyes, the same assessment she'd once faced from New York society women. "I enjoy the work." "How, rustic?" Sarah's smile didn't reach her eyes. "I imagine it must be quite an adjustment from the city. Though I suppose the compensations are worth it." Her gaze drifted meaningfully toward James, who was talking with other farmers. "You're right," Eleanor said calmly. "The compensations are worth it. Having a partner who values me, work that matters, a community that accepts me, I couldn't ask for more." Something flickered in Sarah's expression, regret, perhaps, or realization of what she'd lost. "I hope you'll be very happy," she said, and for the first time, sounded sincere. As spring arrived, melting the snow and revealing the rich earth beneath, Eleanor proposed an idea to James. "I want to start a school." They were reviewing accounts in his study, their study, she'd learned to think of it. A school? For the farm workers' children. And any other families nearby who need one. She leaned forward, animated. "Most of them can't read well. The nearest school is 12 miles away. We have the resources, James. We could make a real difference." He studied her face, seeing the passion there. "Where would we hold it?" "The old equipment barn. We barely use it. We could convert it, hire a proper teacher. I could teach basic literacy myself until we find someone." "You do that? Teach farmers' children?" Eleanor thought of her own mother, who taught her to read despite their poverty, insisting education was the key to a better life. "Absolutely." By summer, the Hartwell School opened its doors. 15 children attended, ranging from 5 to 14 years old. Eleanor taught reading and writing in the mornings, while James hired Margaret Chen, a young teacher from California, to handle mathematics and science. The gratitude from the workers' families was overwhelming. "You didn't marry a farmer," James said one evening, watching Eleanor with obvious pride. "I married a teacher, a business partner, a healer, and an organizer who happens to live on a farm." She laughed, leaning against him on the porch swing. "We both got more than we advertised for." The following spring brought a telegram that changed everything. Eleanor's younger sister, whom she'd thought lost to her forever, had been located in Boston. 17-year-old Lucy had been working in a textile mill under terrible conditions. "I need to bring her here," Eleanor told James urgently. "She's all the family I have left." "Then we'll bring her home," he said simply, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. 2 weeks later, Lucy arrived, thin, exhausted, but her eyes lighting up at the sight of her sister. As Eleanor showed her the farm, the school, the life she'd built, Lucy whispered, "I thought you'd married someone poor." "Your letters said he was just a farmer." "He is just a farmer," Eleanor replied, smiling. "He just happens to be good at it." Lucy thrived at the farm. She helped with the school, found purpose in working with the horses, and slowly healed from her factory experiences. Watching her sister laugh again, seeing color return to her cheeks, Eleanor felt a gratitude so deep it threatened to overwhelm her. One evening, as they prepared for bed, James said, "I need to tell you something." Eleanor looked up from brushing her hair, catching the serious note in his voice. "When I wrote that advertisement," he continued, "I told you I wasn't a wealthy man. I've thought about that a lot. And I've realized, I was telling the truth." She frowned, confused. "James, you own 1,200 acres and—" "I own land and money," he interrupted. "But I wasn't wealthy. Wealth isn't what you own. It's what you have that matters. Family. Purpose. Love. Partnership." He moved closer, taking her hands. "I was poor in all the ways that truly count. Until you came." Eleanor felt tears prick her eyes. "I came here expecting poverty and found riches beyond measure. But not the kind I expected." "Neither of us got what we advertised for," James said softly. "No," Eleanor agreed, kissing him. "We got something infinitely better." 2 years later, Eleanor stood on the same porch where she'd first arrived, watching their daughter, 1-year-old Margaret Eleanor Hartwell, toddle across the grass toward James, who waited with outstretched arms. Lucy was inside, helping Martha prepare Sunday dinner. The school had expanded to 25 students. The farm continued to prosper. Eleanor thought back to that desperate woman on the train, clutching a worn suitcase and a faded photograph, expecting nothing but survival. She'd been prepared for poverty, hard labor, a loveless practical arrangement. Instead, she'd found her true home. Not in the impressive house or prosperous farm, but in the partnership she built with a man who valued honesty, respect, and shared purpose above all else. The real wealth, she'd learned, was never in the bank account or the acres of land. It was in the morning conversations over coffee, the shared laughter at terrible jokes, the respect between equals, the family they'd created, and the community they'd helped build. She'd expected poverty. She'd found treasure. Just not the kind that could ever be counted or measured. James caught Margaret and lifted her high, making her squeal with delight. He looked up, caught Eleanor's eye, and smiled, that same gentle smile that had greeted her at the train station years ago, now deepened with love and contentment. Eleanor smiled back, her heart full beyond measure. She'd been speechless when she first saw his wealth. But it wasn't the barns or fields or house that had truly left her without words. It was discovering that the greatest fortune either of them possessed was each other. And that, she knew, was a treasure beyond price.